Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's IANA webinar, Intermodal Workforce of the Future. We've got a really terrific lineup today that I'm excited to have with us. But before we get started, I just want to do a little bit of thank yous. Our platinum sponsors, they help us out throughout the year. They are bringing this particular webinar to everybody today. So we just want to say thank you to them. They go the extra mile for us, and we really, really appreciate it. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie Ivey, who is kind of a Renaissance gal. She is a program director at the University of Memphis. She puts on a couple of different conferences every year there. She is a terrific educator and a good friend of IANA. So I'm really pleased to turn it over to Stephanie to introduce our panel. Stephanie, over to you.
Thanks, Hal. I'm excited to be here today, and we do have a fabulous panel, so I'm really excited to hear the conversation. We have one more panelist that hopefully is going to be joining us in just a few minutes. She was having some connection difficulties. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and introduce the panelists that we do have with us. So we have Max Farrell, who is CEO of Workhound. You can probably guess which one he is. And then we have Catherine Gamble, who is Director of Supply Chain Transportation and Customer Satisfaction for AutoZone, and Tara Jackson, who's Vice President of Human Resources for IMC Companies. And then hopefully hopping on here in just a minute, we will have Lori Louvier, who's Commercial Manager of Exports for the Port of New Orleans. So we're going to start by just having each of the panelists share a little bit about themselves. Oh, great. I see Lori has connected. So we're going to have each of them share a little bit about themselves and help you understand a little bit better about their background and experience and how they got to where they are today, what their current role is with their company. And I'd like to start with Tara. So Tara, if you'd like to just share a bit about yourself with everyone.
Okay. Hey, everybody. My name is Tara Jackson. I'm the Vice President of Human Resources for IMC Companies. We're a trucking company that goes coast to coast. We have about 27 different locations with about 13 different companies. I started about 15 years ago with IMC Companies as a payroll and benefits specialist and kind of worked our way up. We didn't really have a robust HR department here, so it's been learning and growth. We are a growth-oriented company that grows. We double about every 5 years. So it's been a lot of growth. I was number 37 as an administrative employee, and I can't tell you how many. We have a workforce of over 2,000 now. So it's been a lot of learning and going. But 15 years here and going strong.
Thank you. Catherine.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me today. I'm Catherine Gamble. I'm with AutoZone. I am the Director of Transportation. I've been with AutoZone for 14 years. I started with the organization as a buyer, and I had a lot of import programs. So I spent a lot of time focusing on international. In 2013, I moved over to the supply chain part of the organization and was responsible for all inbound freight into any of our locations, so air, ocean, or land. And last year, I had the opportunity to change roles again and focus on the outbound side. So we have a private fleet that delivers from our distribution centers to our 6,000 stores. So my team is responsible for the safe, on-time, and efficient delivery of all the product that our AutoZone stores sell.
Thank you. And Max.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. My name is Max Farrell. I am the CEO and one of the co-founders of a software company called Workhound. We started at Workhound 5 years ago with the mission we want to help people love the work they do, and we started in this industry in transportation where we know there's a big problem when it comes to driver turnover. What we saw was that a lot of guys quit because they don't feel respected and they don't feel like they have a voice. And often the only option to have a voice is exit interviews or annual surveys, which is either too late because it's an autopsy or it's too slow. Because in this business, a guy can be happy at the beginning of the week, fed up in the middle, and quit by the end. And so we built Workhound to create a real-time feedback loop between companies and their people in order to be proactive about addressing issues, understanding the trends inside the company, and then closing the feedback loop to show people that we're listening and working to get better. And so we work with over 40,000 frontline workers across the country. Most of them are in trucking. And it's been fun to see companies see an improvement in driver retention of up to 30% just by listening to their people, acting on what they say, and telling them what they did. And that's a little bit about WorkHound. Thank you so much for having me on.
That's great. Thank you. All right. And Lori, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate the chance to be able to speak and meet all of you and everybody watching. So my name is Lori Louvier. I'm the commercial manager handling export containerized cargo here at the Port of New Orleans. Before the port, I have been in the industry a very long time, probably about 25 years with ocean carriers, 2 different ocean carriers, one being the longest at 17 years. Before that, I was in the freight forwarding industry, or in between actually, for about 6 years, working for a major freight forwarder in Texas. The experience, with a freight forwarder is I think, one of the best ways to start, just with the realm of experience that you get there. With the ocean carrier, I've done everything from intermodal to customer service to bookings to import, export traffic, equipment, you name it. And then finally, sales. So the longest time was probably 17 years with a huge account list of sales in Texas and Louisiana. And then I've been with the port here for 8 years, like I said, and my role is mainly with export containerized cargo. We're a heavy export port here at the new Port of New Orleans. Imports is definitely growing. But my role is to keep up with the industry, mainly with our top commodities, and follow, what's happening in each of those industries and those, I guess, commodity sectors. And I'm real involved with the trucking industry, rail industry, barge, container on barge. I stay in touch with the customers, the actual folks who are controlling the freight, and sometimes I'm able to match cargo up with the carriers. Make sure our shippers are aware of what services we have here in New Orleans and what can be offered through some of our tenants, that offer all sorts of services. So that's pretty much it.
Thank you. So now I'd like to kick us off with a couple of questions. The first is, what are some of the biggest issues that are currently facing the intermodal sector regarding talent acquisition and development? And all of you have very diverse backgrounds and perspectives, so I'm really interested to hear where we see similarities and where there are some things that are different. So let's start maybe with Lori this time.
Hi. For the Port of New Orleans, we are a landlord port. So a lot of these jobs that, not to say there's not some folks here that have this kind of experience that we're talking about, but a lot of these positions would be actually through our tenants, like the marine terminal operators, or the Public Belt Railroad, New Orleans Public Belt, which actually the Port of New Orleans owns now for 3 years. So while we may not be doing the actual hiring for many of those jobs, our tenants do and our partners do. So in this area, sometimes real good talent is hard to come by. It's still a very, I guess, a small shipping community, if you will, meaning everybody knows everybody. So a lot of these positions that become available are still word of mouth. And, for, I would say, more managerial positions, I've, checked around even for the port and some of our tenants. Those jobs are still, they're using national companies, like whether it's Indeed or LinkedIn, to look for the right candidate for those jobs. It's a national search. Some of the, I want to mention the trucking industry, if I could, real quick. 90% of our cargo moves out of the Port of New Orleans, through the port. 90% of our cargo is in and out by truck. That's a lot of trucks. Right now, because of the oil industry being what it is in Louisiana and in the Gulf, there's a lot of folks looking for work. So while we never have a shortage really of truckers here, for the local or regional business, right now there's an abundance of availability out there. It may be temporary because hopefully those jobs will come back in the oil industry soon. But overall, it's still who you know and what you're looking for. It really depends on what that position is. Don't have to really go out too much, I wouldn't think, unless it's really in that upper managerial position. That's what I have now.
Thank you. And Max, you have a really interesting take on this since you developed your software in your company really to help address workforce challenges. So what do you see?
Well, so what we do is we take open-ended feedback from frontline workers across the industry. And like I said, most of them are in transportation, just to see what are the issues that are popping up without creating bias. Often we see surveys or management asking questions about the problems they think they know, but oftentimes we don't know what we don't know. And as we looked at the top issues in Q3 specifically, the top 4 themes that we saw were around people, equipment, logistics, which is usually operations related comments, and pay. And of course, you'd always expect pay to be in there. But if you drill down into issues like pay, it really is the nuances that matter. So if you look at it in North America, for whatever reason, trucking pay is one of the most convoluted pay structures out there. And so there's a lot of volatility. There's not a lot of predictability, and that leads to frustration. So the biggest issue that we see within pay is people saying, I don't understand my pay, and also it feels like it's incorrect. So really, if you dig deep, pay is a communication issue. So if we think about talent in this industry, the first thing that we have to call out is that the competition is not always the company down the street anymore, because people are considering, do I want to join the gig worker economy and do things like Uber or Lyft? Do I want to do something in construction and maybe be home more frequently than I would have otherwise? So again, transportation, a driver's competition may not be another driving career. So some of the biggest things that companies can do around being a career of choice starts off with, can we provide predictability in work, and then also simplicity in work and pay in how we approach things. And those are big rocks to ask for, but those are the things that our data continues to show. People want predictability, people want simplicity.
Makes sense. Catherine, what do things look like from your perspective?
Our biggest challenge right now is recruiting drivers. Recruiting and keeping the type of drivers that can and are willing to deliver to retail locations. So we ask a lot of our drivers. One of our biggest measures is efficiency. So we slip seat and we ask them to unload auto parts when they reach the store. So and the opportunity is different in different parts of the country. We have 10 DCs, so it's a little different, and the challenges are different in different places. But as far as recruiting, all the way from leadership level down to frontline, I spend more time reviewing and working on recruiting drivers than anything else.
And Tara, share with us your perspective.
So I have a couple different. Our drivers and our mechanics are probably one of the most difficult, and that's, from my perspective, I think a lot of it is there's just not a big, huge pool out there. Those aren't the most, you think about it, when I was raised, it was, you need to get your degree, you need to do this. Well, that's kind of brainwashed, and I think blue collar isn't as much there now with our young workforce, and I think that's part of the challenge you're seeing there. I think our communication, to Max's point, is fairly good with our drivers. Pay always can be higher. But then with our office, it's kind of a different. They want to see that training and development and where can they progress. So they want to see more of the progression of their employment. So those are more of our challenges in the different sectors. The drivers, they know what they're going to be doing. They just want to know that they're going to have a steady job, and the mechanics too, which with being a growth-oriented company, we've been very fortunate to be able to give that to them. So. And with the good benefits. But those are our challenges, just making sure the communication with our office employees, and they're trained well and they can see their path.
Thank you. So as our needs and expectations from the talent pool continue to change at an ever increasing rate, what do you think we need to do to attract and retain a motivated and diverse workforce? So Max, let's start with you.
It's a big question. Attraction in getting people to even want to choose one of these careers is a big hurdle. Getting people to join a company is another one, and getting people to stay is another hurdle in itself. I really like what Tara mentioned about people wanting progression in their work. And really that's a big factor in someone sticking around for the long haul. Yeah, if I always think about development in terms of learning. If people always feel like they're learning and evolving and sharpening their tool belt and their skill set in a position, they will stick around. But in order for that to happen, the table stakes are they have to have good pay, expectations have to be aligned, they have to be working with good people, and the equipment has to be up to par. And as Catherine, as you mentioned, finding the right kind of profile that meets the type of runs that you're doing and the type of equipment that you have to offer, and matching that to the right kind of person, that's the big battle that we're all facing. Yeah, I'd say the other piece that we need to call out in 2020 is that all of us are dealing with a wild economy and a global pandemic. And every single one of us, either listening in or on this panel, has faced some sort of hardship or setback this year. And that is going to include all of our people on the front lines as well. And so we have to recognize things like mental health and the importance of empathy in our interactions with our people. And so something that's really stood out to me in the past 8 months is that people will remember how they are treated by their companies this year. And if at the end of this, when the dust settles, they realize, man, I was treated pretty poorly, they're not going to stick around, and that reputation is going to carry for an organization. And so the companies that I've seen really be innovative and roll up their sleeves have been a co-pilot for their people. So if business has been great, they've celebrated it. But if business has not been great, they've been overly communicative about, here's where we are, here's what we're doing to get out of this situation, and here's how you can help us get out of it. And so those are some of the things that can help with it. But attraction, recruiting, and retaining are all really big rocks that could each own their own day of a not just a webinar, but even just a full-on discussion.
Most definitely. Lori.
Yes. I think if an employer has a clear definition of the kind of person they're looking for a certain position, sometimes I've seen through my time where a person who is not a salesperson and really doesn't have that personality to be in front of customers hired for a position that they don't succeed in just because they're not the right fit, while they maybe could have been better in finance or something else, or even IT department. So I think just looking, knowing what you really are looking for and putting that person, giving that person, because honestly, they're not going to be happy if they're not doing something they enjoy, I believe. So it's important for the recruiter to know what they really need and define that, during the interview process, really get into the nitty-gritty about what they're looking for, what that position is, what it all entails. And, I think you should be able to tell during the interview process if that person is kind of your right fit. And then you look at their experience, and maybe they don't have experience, but they might have that smarts, the computer smarts, and some really good training that you might need in your department. Maybe you offer them something else. So I just think, be clear about what you're looking for. That's something I've seen over my career where it could have been avoided.
Thank you. And Catherine.
Well, I thought Lori made a really good point about being clear what you're looking for. Especially, I mentioned drivers as our biggest challenge. Our recruiters are very clear about what the job is. They're actually based in our distribution centers where our drivers are based, so they can interact with the drivers, talk to them, hear how the folks that they help hire are integrating into the organization. And then after that, we focus on hiring the right people and then reducing turnover. Our turnover is low for the industry. We're proud of that. And we believe that the best thing that we're doing in order to reduce that turnover is our culture. We have transportation operations focused at each one of the distribution centers. We talk to our drivers every day when they come in. We set up as safely as we can with COVID. It's certainly been a challenge this year, but we set up our system so that we look those drivers face to face, when they're interacting with the DC. We don't separate that from our operations. Our DC managers know the drivers. We create kind of a family environment We do a lot of recognition as part of our culture. AutoZone, if you go into any of the stores, you'll see AutoZoners dress a certain way in the stores. We dress that way in our distribution centers. We dress that way in our support operations on Mondays. We wear collar pins, and you earn them for things that you can do. We have special collar pins just for our drivers. We recognize them for safety, and we allow them to recognize each other for the good things they do for each other. We also try to listen to them. I mean, we can't do everything. Certainly, we have to be competitive with pay, but we can't be everything to everybody. But we definitely try to listen to the drivers and make sure that we're reacting to them. So, for example, we had some driver concerns with COVID, with equipment and getting in and out of different tractors. So we had a cleaning protocol, but we started kind of doing what some of the hotels are doing now, with like leaving physical signs and leaving a trail so you could tell it had been cleaned, so you could give the driver the comfort when he gets in the tractor that he's going to be safe. I think those are the best things that we're doing, is just focusing on hiring the right people and then making sure that they don't turn over as little as possible.
I think that's really important, and that kind of leads into our next question about approaches that we need to take, particularly in this current employment environment, to do better with our workforce. And then also sharing maybe some examples of best practice that you have either used within your organization or that you've seen used in other settings. Catherine, let's stay with you because you were already kind of heading down that path. And is there more you can share with us about that?
Sure. We do a couple of things that I think are a little different from other retailers, or different than retailers I've experienced, that I think really helps us out. One is we have a program called DC to Driver. So our distribution center operations, if we have a great AutoZoner who is interested in becoming a driver, we will support them to do that. So we'll let them drive on the yard, let them get some experience, even sending them to driving school and having them come back and drive for us, because it's somebody that we know, we have experience with them, we know that their work ethic, and we can help them improve their career and their life with a position that may pay more and have more opportunity for their family than the one that they currently have. And that's been really successful for us. The other thing we do is we talked a little bit about that drivers are looking for consistency. We have a program we deliver to our stores, and that's fairly consistent work. But you have drivers who are, vacation, sick time, things like that. We have some additional work that we can pick up. We actually can collect freight from some of our vendors on a particular program that we have worked out in the retail environment. So we can keep more drivers necessarily than we have to operate just our day-to-day. And we can offset those drivers and give them work by going and collecting that freight. It's seen as kind of a benefit because it's more bumping docks than having to unload at stores. So it's routes that for the most part a lot of the drivers like, and it gives us flexibility in our day-to-day operations so that we can be consistent with our drivers, and allows us to offset some different costs by collecting the freight ourselves from our vendors. So those kind of things have helped us be more flexible and consistent with the drivers.
Tara, sorry, background voice here.
That's okay. So I think it kind of goes back to Catherine, how you were saying, it's really your culture. I think you have to make sure you have a strong culture. We have a extremely high tenure here across our drivers and our office employees, even our owner operators. We implement certain things like tenure bonuses. Like if an employee's been here for 20 years, they get a $20,000 tenure bonus, recognition that way. At Christmas time, it's a Christmas bonus, but it's based on how many months you've been there. So and I know these all seem monetarily, but they are really appreciated by the employees, and they know that there's forethought to that. We do send out driver surveys to our drivers, and we make sure that we address those. I think it's super important as a manager and a leader of a company that you listen closely to the heartbeat of your drivers and their concerns, the mechanic, any employee, and you address them. If you don't, that's not helping your culture. And if they have a concern with their dispatcher and not being treated, then you need to make sure you're communicating and why, because a lot of times you just have to find that common ground and you can get past it. Other things, technology is super important, even just making sure our drivers have an employee portal where they can always go view their vacation time. They can go view their checks and see all their polls just to make sure they understand. And just having that understanding and where do I go if I have an issue and just walk through it. I think those are a lot of the main things to make sure that you are on the right path.
Thank you. Lori.
Yes, the port has done several things prior to this year out here at what we call our plaza or in our auditorium. It's sort of like a community outreach program that we have. I guess that would be the best way to describe it. We offer tours on the port, basically on the river that goes by our terminals and the entire port facilities. That is open to the public. We've had tons of students from colleges and even high school, families, kids, learning about what is happening at the Port of New Orleans. A lot of folks don't even realize. We've also done other types of community outreach, going to colleges to speak, talk about the jobs that are available. Basically working on the river is what we call it. And we've done lots of things here. We invite, it's open to anyone, and just teach them about the types of jobs that are available. And usually, 9 out of 10, we meet folks that could be potential candidates for maybe starter positions here at the port even. But our tenants meet folks. It's just really a good way to teach the local folks about what's really available job-wise. There's so many aspects. You can be a river pilot. You can, work at the gate at one of the terminals. You can learn how to work a container crane. There's just so many positions available. So we pride ourselves in really staying involved with the community. And that's been an initiative for the Port of New Orleans, I would say, for the last 5 years. Maybe it wasn't a top priority before, but it has become something that we need to do as the only major port in this area as far as container ports. The other thing that I've noticed, and I do have an example, one of our VPs here just told me a story about attending an award ceremony here in New Orleans, and it was actually held in person. Social distancing and all of that was taken into consideration. But there was a student actually that graduated, a college grad from Belgium, that attended. And we've seen that a lot at different conferences that we've hosted. Students will call saying, do you offer discounts for students or, college, either they're still in college or they've just graduated. And we absolutely do. If they're going to take time out of their day and pay to attend a conference that they know no one at, that shows a lot of interest, I think. And actually, one of our managers just told me just a few weeks ago, there was this award ceremony, and a young gentleman walked up to him and introduced himself. Again, he's living here in New Orleans, looking to make this a long-term resident, and he has some marine background as far as his studies in college. He speaks 3 languages, and he is on this level, with trade, and he knows a lot about, what international trade, maybe a little bit about international financing, but he wants to learn the nuts and bolts. So that would be someone that we will spend time with and show him the nuts and bolts. Stephanie has seen the nuts and bolts, what really goes on behind the flood wall at the Port of New Orleans. There's a lot more than people realize what it takes to ship something. As you all know, it's not always so easy. And I love to take someone like that and really teach them and talk about how it works, just kind of shipping 101. And this is someone that, could turn into a future candidate for the Port of New Orleans. So it's interesting how you can meet people when you least expect it. So that's something that we do a lot. Another company that I know of really looks for VOTEC type. They look at people with this experience because they're needed for jobs in the technical part of their business, but they try to keep these people if they look like someone that is going to, they really watch them and try to not let them leave for, $5 more an hour or something, and they try to bring them up into management. Maybe it might take a long time, but, to try to hire within when possible, and keep, like, we mentioned earlier, keep your people happy that are giving you their heart, if you will. Treat those employees like they should be treated, whether it's pay, whether it's, understanding family situations during COVID, all sorts of things. But I think that goes a long way.
Those are some great examples. Thank you. Matt?
Yeah, I really appreciate the mentions of culture because culture is the secret ingredient of any healthy organization, and so I would challenge anyone listening in today to ask: do we have a culture of curiosity? Are we inquisitive about what is going on in our front lines? Are we empathetic about what they're running into? And then mapping out the path of if we're not there, how do we create a culture of curiosity? And of course, the ground level for that is just figuring out how do we ask people for direct feedback about what they're experiencing inside our organization, and build from there. I was working with a carrier recently, and they asked their entire company, what is our company's KPI? Is it revenue per truck per day? Is it one of these 5 other things? And it was split in what people thought the KPI was, as far as like the most important metric inside the company. And while most people all agreed on what the key metric was, I think it was very telling that across the organization, there was an opportunity for more people to be in lockstep of here's the most important thing inside the business. And as people start to have that curiosity and want to get feedback, really we have to figure out who is going to do the listening, who's going to do the acting, and who's going to be doing the responding. Because if you talk to an organization and you ask who's responsible for workforce retention, or maybe in a trucking company, who's responsible for driver retention, and they'll say everyone's responsible. But we all know, Business 101, if everyone is responsible, no one is accountable. And so we have to figure out who are the specific people inside an organization that are going to be digesting this feedback, putting together the trends, and then sharing internally, hey, here's our top issues. What are we going to do about it? How are we going to communicate back to our people about some of these issues that are coming in? And Tara, I really appreciate that you all are emphasizing this is how we're getting back to our people based on what they say, even if we can't do anything. And oftentimes that's the case. If somebody says we want purple trucks and your company's colors are red and white, tell them here's why we're not going to do purple trucks. Like, we're all grown adults here. We can take a no, but at least explain why and then keep moving on. And then I'd say the other thing that I'm starting to see this year more than I have in years past has been a rethinking of the driver's needs and the role that entails. So historically, companies that had times where they were on the road for 1 week to months at a time, they would say, well, this is just our job. You can either take it or leave it. And now companies really are starting to think, how do we restructure our operations so that people can have an out and back and be home a few times a week or even nightly, so that we can be competitive in the industry? And that is a big question that's happening right now across the supply chain, is rethinking the work in order to attract the modern day worker.
Thank you. All really great points. So I wanted to come back to a couple of points that you guys made. The first is something that Lori brought up just a minute ago, really related to outreach. And as those of you who know me, and Max, who is going to now know me, and he'll be hearing from me later, but outreach is one of the things that's definitely near and dear to my heart. And I think I've worked with all 3 of you related to either K-12 or college student outreach. And with our center, the Southeast Transportation Workforce Center, one of the things that we have focused very heavily on are some of the key workforce challenges and what we can do to really address these. And one of the main issues that we see over and over again is really misunderstanding of the transportation industry and lack of respect for the importance of the roles. And I think a lot of that just simply comes from the fact that people don't know what the jobs are and how important they are, and the diversity of opportunities in transportation. I was meeting with a group of parents and students when we were starting the new transportation STEM high school here in Memphis. And, we were getting almost hostile response when we were talking about doing this transformation to this school. And, so I finally asked, what is it about transportation that you don't like? And they said, well, there's just only, one thing they can do. And we were at that point really going, oh, wow, okay, yeah, people are not getting the message. And so we had to really flip that conversation and come in saying, hey, you tell us what you want to do, and we'll tell you how you can do that in transportation. So I wanted to hear a little bit more from all of you about some of the things that you guys have been doing really in terms of outreach, whether it's, general public or it's specifically with high schools or even younger students or college students, just to learn a little bit more about some of the things that you guys have going on to try to change those perceptions. So who would like to start?
I'll start.
Okay, Catherine.
We have a very strong annual internship program, and we bring, in years that aren't marked by COVID, we typically bring in quite a number of college interns from around the country into AutoZone. And I think I have been active with those interns and really enjoyed it. And it's been very interesting in that we've been able to attract interns into the supply chain part of the organization that maybe aren't supply chain students, that they're business students or international studies or finance or something like that. And they recognize the importance of this supply chain. And so it's really fun to get to talk to those, because one of the things that I've really enjoyed about my personal career with AutoZone is that from a supply chain perspective, I've spent a number of years in the industry. I did a lot of product management with a huge supply chain bent to it before I even worked directly in the supply chain for AutoZone. And I think just getting the opportunity to talk to the interns and show them how many different things you can do, how many different jobs there are, the wonderfulness that there's almost always jobs in supply chain, or people always need professionals in supply chain. You won't be out of work. I don't have necessarily the answer to how to get in front of all those students, but the ones that I've had the opportunity to talk to about it have been amazing, talented, very interested in it, and several of them have gone on are still working at AutoZone today. So I think it's just maybe finding their ear is maybe the challenge, because the story is amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Tara.
So some of ours actually was inspired, I guess, through the pandemic. A lot of individuals don't know, or they would maybe look at the truck driver as, well, that's not really a glamorous job. And I think, and you and I, Stephanie, we've talked in other formats, really getting to that child level and the parent level is key, whether it's just letting them know about all the different positions, letting that little girl know that it's okay if she wants to be a truck driver, that's okay. Yep. So some of the things through the pandemic that we did, like when we were all quarantined, well, guess who wasn't quarantined? Our drivers. So we launched an initiative with some of our schools when the schools were looking for something for their children to do remotely. Let's thank a truck driver. And we would promote it on Facebook and send them to them, maybe text it to them. So that did a couple different things. It educated our children. I can't tell you how many that it helped them with the understanding of, oh, this is how we're getting our needs. And at that time, it was we all needed toilet paper. So maybe they thanked a truck driver for that. Maybe it was a blanket. But it was different things, and they were doing a nice thing. And they understood that our truck drivers were really our heroes at that time. And it wasn't the person that had the college degree. It was the person that was doing that blue-collar job. So just different things like that. But I really think to move it forward, you're going to have more tech schools and explain our intermodal industry more. It's not just one thing, one job.
That's great. Lori, are there other things you'd like to share?
I do have something else to share. I was thinking about something that actually happens every year, but unfortunately will not occur this year at the New Orleans Public Belt Railroad, Stephanie, where we visited with your group that you brought down. Every year, they have these really old, restored, like from the 1920s, cars that are just absolutely beautiful. They used to do more work than they do for receptions and business type settings. They still can do that, but they're there. And what the belt and the port does is offers to it. There's no cost. It's just we advertise it. It's mainly starts with port families, employees and families, and then if there's availability, we open it up a little bit, to the tenants, and gets pretty full by then. But so what they do is it's holiday event for the children, for the kids, really, but the adults love it as much, but or just as much. But everybody's, the employees are dressed in like elves. And there's a movie that's shown right outside it's the Polar Express. And it's just a great, great event. And there's all sorts of information out there about what is the New Orleans Public Belt Railroad? What does it do? Another thing, that this is a really successful event that we do every year. What a shame, it can't happen this year. Another thing that the port has done is at the Children's Museum in New Orleans. I have not seen this yet, but I think about a year ago, there was an old display about the Port of New Orleans. It shows containers, ships, trains, trucks, and kind of how they all intermingle. But now there's apparently a really nice display, and with a little working crane and the different kinds of commodities and examples of the commodities that move through the port. A great little learning tool for everybody, So if you ever visit New Orleans and want to take your kids or not to the Children's Museum when everything's open again, please do. So that's a little bit of that here and there. I think goes a long way. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. No, that's great, Max.
2020 it's been a year. I'll just leave it at that. But it's been a great year for the trucking industry, especially. Not only from a financial standpoint for a lot of companies, but just exposure. That especially in the early months of this pandemic, a big positive light has been shown on this industry, and people saw the same purpose that we all see day in and day out. Is that if you bought it, a truck brought it. And so people have really started to appreciate truck drivers and the industry, and really understanding the supply chain of all the steps it takes for you to get your toilet paper. And so that's the first thing that we need to recognize is we look at how do we do outreach and attract the next generation of people into this industry. It's using what really motivates. I call myself a millennial, my generation and younger, the Gen Z type folk, where purpose is a really big part of choosing what you want your next job or career to be. Because if you look at the data of what people want in a job, I believe 60% of people will take a job with less pay if it has more purpose. And so, there's data that aligns. This is what people want. And another thing that I think is powerful is to provide empathetic experiences. I know the state of Arkansas has a trailer that goes to different schools where they can interact with different aspects to get exposed to the trucking industry. But, even if there's ways to do ride-alongs, that was incredibly eye-opening for me before we even started our company. I rode with a driver from Iowa to Los Angeles. So I slept in the truck, ate in the truck, showered at truck stops, and saw the beauty and the ugly of the road, but fell in love with the stories and the people. And that's what this industry is at its core. It's a people business. And if we recognize that and celebrate it, I believe it'll naturally start to attract more people.
If I could add a little bit, Max, touching on what you said about the appreciation, the drivers, without them, I don't know where we would be. I always let the driver go in front of me. I think we owe them all the respect in the world. They are essential for sure. But every year, as you know, some of you know, there's a Truck Driver Appreciation Week, usually in the fall, right? Early fall or late summer. For probably, I would say 4 or 5 years, we decided to show appreciation to our drivers. And so what we do, we pick out, it may not always fall on that week, but it's usually very close to the week. But what we do is we go out to the terminals, and we have a place where We serve them breakfast. We're out there early with tents. We have T-shirts. We have goodie bags. We give them breakfast. And as they drive up, before they're in queue, if you will, they get out, and the smiles on their faces. We've met lots of grandfather, grandson, granddaughter, sons and fathers who have decided, I'm going to follow my dad's footsteps, or, so we've met a lot of family members who are in truck drivers, and these are all local, what would be considered local drivers doing container drays. Local, say within 100 to 300 miles, are very local. So we've seen the same drivers year over year, and we get to know them, and they appreciate this so much. And you rarely hear them complaining. You'll ask them, is there any issues you have? They're so appreciative at that time, they're not going to, they don't give you any complaints. Very rare do we get about their day-to-day, and coming in and out of the port, but we're there to listen. And it just really goes a long way, and they look forward to it every year. So, if you can, do something for wherever you are, or for your drivers during that time. And I'm sure some of you already do. We probably have it come through on each day, I would say 400 drivers that stop. So we have to have, enough stuff, food, drink, and goodies for approximately 400 drivers. So that's just something else to think about, and we did it this year. We just all wore masks and made sure they had on their masks.
Also, loud noises in my background again, so I hope you're gonna be able to hear me, but I just wanted to say thank you to all of you for sharing all of that, and for all the work that you're doing to really make a difference in the industry, and to reach out and impact students and their families, and help them understand what those opportunities are, because it does make such a huge difference. I see it all the time with the K-12 students that we work with, but also even just with my students. When Lori came to speak to my class, or when I took them out to visit her, and they had no idea that half of the things that are open to them are open to them, and so that's one of the things that gets me so excited after we go do something like this, or we have speakers from IMC or from AutoZone or whoever, and it just really opens their eyes, and it makes them go, hey, wow, I had no idea that I could do that, And so that's just, I think, so important for helping to really build that pipeline and make sure that it's really robust. And the other thing too that I think that we need to do more of is really encourage our drivers and mechanics and other workers to be role models for younger students that are thinking about career pathways. Because if they don't know what is out there, and they don't see somebody that they can connect with and understand a little bit more about the career, it's very difficult for them to even put it in the realm of consideration when they're thinking about what they want to do. So thank you very much to all of you for all the work that you're doing in that area. And I know we have only just a few minutes left, and Hal, I believe you had some closing remarks you needed to make.
Yeah, a little bit, and I think I'll play a little fast and loose with our time, and I'm going to cheat in at least a few questions. We did get some questions in from the audience, and I think a couple of these are really good. So I'm going to try to compress a couple of them because they're similar in theme, and it's around sort of countering the challenging feedback that sometimes folks can get from past employees that may be a little disgruntled and a little crabby about this or that. So do you have any tips about countering that sort of negative vibe that sometimes folks can get from past employees that may have an axe to grind?
So I can take first crack on that one. First off, it's just good to be human back to them. That if they are like the worst thing you can do when it comes to negative reviews online is to hide from it, because then that person is controlling the message. So it's really important to recognize it and say, hey, we hear you. Please contact so-and-so specifically. We'd love to talk about this directly. While we may not be a fit for you anymore, we're working every single day to improve our experience for our more than 1,000 people that work at our company that share rave reviews. And you could even give examples of a positive review. So those are some of the things that we've seen, is just recognize it, respond, try to isolate it offline, because that way you're back in there controlling the message instead of letting a negative impression control that.
No, that's great, Max. Anybody else have any advice in that regard?
I think it's really just addressing it and letting them know that their voice is heard. Most times that's what they want. And then if it's big enough and you need to address it to your current staff, then you have that ability to correct it going forward.
Makes sense. Here's one, and I'll probably direct this to Stephanie, but do you have any advice in tapping into education programs that exist to help form relationships? Because it seems like they're good resources for future leaders and just sort of a stream of employees.
Yes, absolutely. So, depending on what kind of roles you're looking to connect with, if you're looking at vocational types of pathways, I would start actually at the high school level and maybe even down to middle school, because all of the schools across the country have programs called career and technical education. And it's the leaders of those programs in each of the districts that you want to make connections with, because they are looking for industry partners to help tell the story of a variety of career pathways, and transportation is always one of the key sectors that they are looking to highlight. So that's definitely one of the things that I would do. And if it is for jobs where the students have to have a college degree or even an advanced degree, then certainly making as many connections as you can with universities in the particular disciplines. And it doesn't have to be just going in and speaking to a class or finding a way to be part of a career fair or something like that. If you have a project that you think you would like to have some, young minds working on, that is a fabulous opportunity for students. And I know faculty like myself are always looking for ways that we can partner with companies to give students more of a real world learning experience. So if you have ideas or you can come up with some sort of problem or challenge that you think would be a good fit, reach out and ask, because you more than likely are going to get a very positive response.
No, that's terrific. That's a terrific bit of advice. I know that as an association, we've done that a couple of times with some schools, but that's a great way to create that synergy. I would also encourage folks to check out the Freight Transportation Institute at the University of Memphis, run by a very astute Dr. Ivey, which does some really great work, including a couple of really fascinating meetings each year, one of which is dedicated to getting young folks excited about transportation. So there's some really cool stuff going on there. So I would definitely encourage people to check that out as a great starting point. And they really represent an incredible example of the synergy between educational institutions and local organizations that need that kind of support. So, for example, a couple of the folks on the panel today have developed good relationships with University of Memphis because of that kind of interaction. So I think that's really great. Ayanna, just a little bit of plug for Ayanna's education program. We as an association have a scholarship program. We've got 10 participants currently, and their schools across the nation. And it's been really fun working with those schools because they've got outreach programs that are very unique to their area and the kinds of businesses that are serving them. So it's there's more information about those schools on the Ayanna website at intermodal.org if you're interested. But I could go on. I think this is a really fascinating topic, and I think we certainly will never solve for recruitment or retention. But it's great to get the conversation started with such compelling folks and some great thoughts today. So I very much appreciate it. I wish we could keep going, but I think in deference to everybody's time, we're gonna wrap up. But I want to thank everybody. Dr. Ivey, thank you very much for pulling this panel together. Tara, Catherine, and Max, and Lori, thank you for your time and your great insights. I really do appreciate it. I think people really benefit from digging in a little bit on this topic. If you're interested in a little bit more information about what's going on at IANA and the programs that we put on, go ahead and head over to intermodal.org or shoot us an email at info@intermodal.org. If you've got questions that are specific, you can hit me up. My email address is hal, H-A-L, @intermodal.org. So feel free to reach out if you've got questions. And just one more shout out to our sponsors this year for this particular webinar. The platinum sponsors have gone the extra mile for us, and we very much appreciate the work that they do for us. So we just want to give them another thank you. And with that, I will say adieu, but I wish everyone safe and happy holidays,